Hello, it's me, Kyle. Welcome to Give Pause Hobby, a channel where I stop to appreciate the things I love to fill my free time with. Today, I have something very exciting to film, and that is the solo teach for Old King's Crown. So this game has been just kind of rolling around my mind ever since, well, for a long time in a smaller way, but ever since I got the prototype. So just get it right out of the way. Erie Idle Games were nice enough to send me the second round prototype, so that includes the solo mode that we're going to go over today. So thank you so very much to entrusting me with this wonderful product. I hope these videos can do it justice, because holy moly have I been loving the experience. It's just been it's a constant daydream thinking about when the next time I was going to play, who of my friends would really appreciate this game, multiplayer, who would love it solo. Like it's just there. It's just on loop up here. So today is going to be kind of a throwback to those of you who've been on the channel since a while back when I did the last ROOTbot Academy stuff. And will again when there's more ROOTbot stuff to be talked about. So this will kind of follow a little bit of that format, but it'll be a little bit different for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is a prototype, so you know, changes can and will happen to the design, to the look, to the mechanisms, both small and large. I've been talking with the guys at Erie Idle, and they are open about this, that this is, while this prototype is incredibly fun, as is, obviously it's missing art that's going to be there, but there are some mechanics that are still, they're still looking at to see what would serve the product best and serve the players best. So this is going to be something I will re-record. You better believe I'm a day one backer for this, so I'm not feigning any sort of objectivity here. I don't really do that on this channel, if you haven't picked up on that. But I'm going to be doing all this again, and sort of like I replaced the original ROOTbot Academy videos by marking them outdated in all caps and then redirecting people to the newer ones. I'll be doing the same here. So I don't want to dive in right to the deep end, going through, you know, the chapter and verse of the rule book. First of all, it's its own separate rule book. We have the base game here, and we have the solo here. It is not some, you know, back of the book, read these couple of lines and then you can play it solo, which, for better or worse, some games are like that. Some games it works great. In this game, there's a lot that goes into it. It's more akin to, say, like a hybrid John Company Pax Pamir, which would make sense because Ricky Royal is at the helm. So I don't want to just go into all the lines of this. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on this first of all. This is the turn summary, and I'm going to walk you through what would happen in a turn. Before that, I'll show you the setup. I will walk you through the steps of that. I'll show you the different components, kind of explain, going along with the rulebook, the different parts of the components, how they work. And then after I go through this, I've got two other things. This is going to be probably a bit of a longer video, but as with all of my videos down below, there are timestamps. So please use them for whichever section you are interested in. Because after the turn summary, I'm going to go back. There are some edge cases that I will just ignore on the first pass, because you won't always be up against them. You won't always need to know certain things, like what happens if you tie, what happens if there's a this, so I'm not going to bog down the turn summary with that. I'll go back and we'll talk about it. And then lastly, but maybe for some of you most importantly, there will be a one-turn example at the end, and it won't be just like a slice of a solo play. It will just be me playing one turn, and it will be kind of the deck will be stacked, so to speak, to show off as many of these mechanisms as I can possibly think of. Again, think about the example turns in the Clockwork rule books from Root. They have a single turn for each of those factions, and it tries to show off as many of that of the functions that those bots will operate on as it can. Now, down the road, there will be the second part of my SWATA video. So what's all this about? Up here in the corners is a link to the first theme. And then at some point in the hazy future, there will be an actual full solo playthrough. Now, there's also one of those that exists already with Ricky Royal. So there's a link down below in the description. So you can go to that and check it out now, and then I'll eventually have mine down the road. Because this is, at its core, this is really just me trying to hype up this game in the language that I speak, and that is somewhat overwrought teaching of solo modes to board games. Because I'm a teacher by trade. I'm very detail oriented when it comes to this sort of stuff. So I love trying to understand everything about it. The guys at Eerie Idol know that full well. Thank you for being such gracious email corresponders with my questions. And I'm just excited for this game to come out to more people sooner. So with that said, just a reminder, everything that's going to be in this video, I don't think there's actually like a version number printed in my rule book. But this is I'm told, the second round of the prototypes. I'm recording it in October 2023. So I think in the not too distant future, there's going to be an updated rule set for the solo mode on TTS. So much of this will transfer. Some of it may be different, but if you're wondering why, that would be it. So before I get into any of that, all the multitudinous chapters of rules, as I'm already 7 minutes into the video and I haven't even cracked the rule book yet, I'm going to kick it off with maybe a non-standard way to kick off a teach, but with a product like this makes all the sense to me in the world, and that is to read the introduction, the setting introduction at the front of the rule book. So here we go. A fog settles over the kingdom. Something is moving out over the ice-kissed wharves. It slips through the sleeping city streets. It tumbles over great waterfalls and glides across placid, moon-mirroring lakes. It supines through reeds and stacked sheafs, working itself into half-forgotten shrines and swimming in their light. A fog unlike any the kingdom had seen. Still, more unsettling is what has been sighted and heard within. Snatches of eerily familiar shapes stare out. Others drift glacially just beyond sight. Phosphorus points of light, the hiss of a country made of steam, beneath which a clicking clockwork language keens. Now the great doors of courts and halls grind open to reveal figures that glint in the sudden dimness that floods in, whose faces and intentions seem to ripple out of reach like a reflection on a wind-plucked pool. The Simulacrum has arrived. The solo mode for the Old King's Crown pits you against the Simulacrum, an automated opponent in the guise of one of the game's existing factions, as they work against you to acquire enough influence to fulfill their unknowable ambitions. Knowledge of the multiplayer mode is required to follow the rest of the book, so please familiarize yourself with the game's systems by reading the Old King's Crown rulebook. Once you have, you may begin learning the solo mode covered in this book. When playing the solo mode, the player will move through a round's phases as they would in a multiplayer game, completing their actions as they would normally, with a few exceptions. Additionally, when instructed to do so, they will perform actions on the Simulacrum's behalf. Let's get into it. The solo mode, the Simulacrum, operates on some components which will be unique to the decks of the game's factions, and they appear in 3 different sized cards. The main bulk of what it's going to be using is going to be their Simulacrum faction cards. So unlike the backs of the other factions, these are black, and they have icons in the middle. So we'll get to more of that later on. This is an important part of the operation, and also one of the reasons why I think I like it so much. So the fronts of the cards have different characters on them with different strength values and keywords, just like the factions cards do, but just, the creepy robot Simulacrum version of them. Now, in addition to that, they have some things that are also the same. They have kind of their heir, the crown character that's going to always be in their opening hand, so you want to have that separate. They're going to also have these cards that have currently the same art, but are very different. This is the Speaker and the Rider, and we'll talk about those a little bit longer. This is how they will access the court and their site of power for their faction, respectively, because as you might imagine, or as you will see soon, the Simulacrum does a lot of things that are player adjacent, but in its own flavor. The last of these big tarot-sized cards are these fog cards. You can see this kind of wavy symbol here. So these are also going to, when you turn over, be like the characters from the main deck, except whereas this one has just a big art and some keywords and a little bit of flavor text at the bottom, the fog cards are going to be pictureless and have a lot more text. And again, we will go over that with everything else a little bit more in a second. And then we got the 2 other size cards. So we have the medium kind of mini poker size cards for their Manoeuvre and Resolution deck. So if you've played PAX Pamir 2nd edition with the Wakan automated opponent, you're going to be familiar with kind of taking 2 parts. Now in that game, it was the back of the cards and the front of the cards. In this game, you're going to take the fronts of both of them, but they're going to line up and kind of create a to-do list for that turn, where they're going to put their priorities and what they're going to want to do. So it's going to offer lots of versatility because it's not just drawing 1 card, it's making a combination from 2 different piles. And the other cards fell on the ground. So the smallest size cards here are the Modifier cards. So these are ways, you'll see little red and blue dots here. These are ways to adjust or modify the Simulacrum to make it either more difficult for the red dots or less difficult for the blue dots. As you'll see, some of the archetypes in the book will specifically tell you certain modifiers to put in place to give it a specific feel. But you can always customize with whatever ones you want, however you see fit. And the last thing they're going to be showing is the Furnace. Also in this tiny little card, this is going to go over the collaborator space on the faction board that the Simulacrum will be using. Now, on that point, just like the intro text talks about, the Simulacrum isn't a distinct faction. It's not the Black Hole Sun from Advance Wars or whatever, the gray faction that comes in, have all their own units and stuff. This is supposed to be an eerie takeover of a faction that already exists in the world. So you might be playing against the Simulacrum nobility. So they have the stature of the nobility, but they're acting strange, and you can't get a fair read of the normal nobility from them, and that's for good reason, because they're taken over by this creepy magic fog thing, or mechanical fog. We don't really know. It's supposed to be mysterious, but it's also supposed to have the guise of one of these factions. So when you take over the board, you'll put the furnace down to take over its collaborator. You will replace the cards in that faction's deck with the Simulacrum's cards, and you will not use any of the faction's tactics. If you choose, you'll put, I've been putting the little modifier cards in that little strip where you would place your faction tactics. So really, if you strip it down bare, the only comparison that you have between the Simulacrum faction and a player-controlled faction of the same color is really just the look of it, and then the theme. So you can imagine, again, like a clockwork uprising or a clockwork gathering. And I think that's a really cool use of the components that they have, and gives it an eerie, just like otherworldliness, that it's not its own thing. It's just taking over something you already knew. Okay, so let's take a look at these cards with a little bit more detail. Now, as I mentioned, the actual like supporter cards with the different traits and the keywords, and they all have the same picture for right now. They're going to appear just like a normal faction. So you have the strength up at the top, the trait of what type of card is underneath it, and any keywords that are at play down here. Now, the Simulacrum will try to use as many keywords as it can. Some of them, like eliminate, it will actually use, but some of them, like authority or quest, it'll be different, and we'll get to that down the road. So I'm not actually going to go into detail on those because they're roughly the same as what you're used to with the other factions. But let's look at the Maneuver and the Resolution cards, because those are completely different because no one else uses them. So on the Maneuver card, when you flip this over, it's going to tell you a couple things. The behavior, the label is up at the top. The location where the Simulacrum is going to place their Herald is right underneath it. And the number, the space number with the fog symbol, is where they're going to place their initial fog card, if they have one, and we'll get to that in a little bit, when they actually place their units in the summer. To the side, you see kingdom card types and priority arrows, and that all has to do with if they so choose to try getting a card from the Great Road in the winter. So the other half, because there's two parts of the brain of every turn, the resolution card is going to also have the behavior up at the top. And then you're going to see three areas. They're going to be these three like boxes: the Highlands, Plateau, and Lowlands. So just like the main areas on the actual board. Now, for each of them, off to the right is going to be kind of a highlighted diamond that's going to show you the priority for that region. So how much emphasis the Simulacrum is putting on the Highlands, Plateau, and Lowlands, respectively. So you'll see some other things in the boxes as well. On the left-hand side are the maneuver numbers, which have to do with how the what order the Simulacrum would want the regions to resolve if they get to choose, but also where they put their fog card. The little symbol that kind of looks like a sunrise or a crown is where the Simulacrum will place its companies in the summer. And then each of them has a specific reward. Now, an important change from Simulacrum gameplay from players is that they will not, while they will place their Herald somewhere and they will fight over those different areas, they will not take those rewards. The rewards on their resolution cards are what they will get should they win any clash, which is obviously, you know, a big change. So we've said enough about the fog cards. Let's look at those now too. So up at the top of the cards, you'll see the name, and then to the upper left, the strength, the trait, and so far, so normal faction card. But then you have the keywords right next to the strength and a basic ability. So this will always trigger. Well, the keywords will try to trigger, and the basic ability will, you know, trigger as much as it can given the situation. But down below, where it says the advanced ability, you'll notice it labels the Simulacrum behavior. So that has to do with that label that was up at the top of the resolution card, not the maneuver card. They are the same names, but we're only basing it off of if the card they flipped over this year was, say, plotting, and there was also plotting on the fog card, then the advanced behavior or ability would also trigger. So the card, it's a little bit trickier than the standard supporters because the basic ability already makes it a little bit weird, but then the advanced ability makes it, even more so. And the last thing I'm going to look at is the furnace. Remember, this is the replacement for the collaborator space, because really the mod cards, they're just going to say like hand size is up or hand size is down or extra strength when the Herald is in a space. So it's pretty cut and dry, easy to understand, and they're all very situational. But the furnace is going to always be in play. And in spring, the player is going to choose two things. And they may pick the same option twice. So if the Simulacrum has the collaborator, they will, the player gets to choose between giving the Simulacrum, or the sim, which I'll just be referring to it from now on, the sim to gain one influence. The sim places one influence on the speaker. The sim places one influence on the rider, or the player discards the top two cards of their draw pile. So that's always going to be in place. There isn't an alternate, collaborator like card, but it only goes into effect if the sim actually has the collaborator. Stands to reason. All right, so the last two cards to talk about in the components are the speaker and the rider. So these look like the artwork for the other supporter cards, but I've been told that the artwork used on these and all the others is actually going to be the artwork for the speaker. It's just that right now art is incomplete, and so it just looks cool, but they all look identical. So what these do, these take the place of the authority and the quest mechanics, which for the other factions is how they will get influence from taking over the court, or unlock their myth cards by going to their site of power. And how these work is actually interacting with their resolution cards. So in the Highlands, sometimes the resolution cards or the rewards for the Simulacrum will have them put an amount of influence on either their speaker or their rider. And both of them work in a pretty similar way in this regard. So for the speaker, who resides just outside the court in the setup, if there's no influence on the speaker, it remains inactive outside the court. If any influence is placed on it, it moves into the court, removing any cards there. Further influence can be added to the speaker while it is in the court. And in the spring, the sim gains influence equal to the influence on this card. And lastly, whenever a card is placed in the court, it removes the speaker and all influence on it. And I'll just read the other one, then we'll go over some general guidelines and then get into the rest of the rules. For the rider, it never leaves the site of power. It treats each influence on it as quest 1. Whenever an influence is placed on the rider, check. So first up, A, if there's enough quest to pay the cost on a card in its site of power, it will do so, activating the site and moving the card to the top of the sim draw pile, and or fulfilling any effects on the gained card. Then B, if it has already completed A and has 3 or more quests, it will activate the site of power and gain 3 influence. And then C, if it can't do A or B, it will pass. So a rule about the rider and then a rule about both of them. So the rider, it doesn't explicitly say, but when it says to activate the site, that swipes the cost off of the rider. So if it has 4 quests there, for the first step, it would swipe 3 of them away and it would leave just 1, and then you would get that card. Now it actually has 2 cards it can gain from its site, so that 1 will stick around and it'll be 1/3 of the way there to gaining that second myth card. In the B step, if it's 3 or more, it'll pay the whole thing and just gain 3 influence, which is not good. Getting 3 influence just like that is a big deal in this game. So then both of them, like I said, these replace the mechanic of authority and quest for the players. So they will not activate the actual locations in the Highlands that the players normally use authority and quest for. So just like always, you ignore that activation, but also they do have cards that have those things, authority and quest, but the sim will never actually use them. The only way that these will be activated is if they win the Highlands region and it tells them to activate them. Now, there are ways that things can be placed on the rider or the speaker, and that comes in the winter regarding things they gain from the Great Road. We'll get that down the road. So there we go. Kind of two important cards. And for those eagle-eyed viewers out there, you know, I have a different undershirt and my hair is a little bit different because this is the second day. So I forgot this the first time, and here we are, a second day. All right, so with that, let's get into the setup. So a lot of the setup is going to be the same. Yours as the player is going to be identical, but the Simulacrum is going to be, again, just parallel to the player experience. So first up, you're going to choose what type of opponent you're facing. There's the standard archetypes here where you give them a certain number of companies, randomly draw fog cards, and apply no modifiers. Later on, in a different video, because this is going to be long enough, I'll dedicate some time to the wonderfulness that is the archetype system that you can use pre-built ones, you can make your own, or you can just use these standard ones. So once you have the archetype, you're going to get all the faction-specific components of that chosen faction, minus the cards or the tactic, pieces. That's not it, but it's close enough. So you're going to put the faction board in the area. You're going to place any modifier cards at the bottom of the player board. You're going to place the faction's starting hand size at 4. And then you're going to place the number of companies that you were given on the board. Then you're going to put the Herald on the board and put any of the faction tokens nearby so you can use. The site of power is going to be put just with the other ones. Like, again, so far, so normal setup. And you're going to place the order marker in first. So the Simulacrum will always lead, which, as you know, if you've found the game, isn't always the benefit that it typically is in other games. So then you'll take the specific Simulacrum components to finish up the setup. So the furnace will go on the board like we talked about. You'll put their air card face down underneath the rest of their cards. You'll search for their myth cards, and you will shuffle them. There are 2. You'll shuffle them, put them face up underneath their site of power so they can unlock them, not together, but individually, but in a random order. Then you're going to search or randomly draw fog cards from that deck and shuffle those into their main deck of cards. You'll put the speaker near the court, the rider on their site of power, shuffle the maneuver and resolution cards, and put the rest of the fog cards that you haven't used yet off to the side because there's a chance you'll use them in the game. And that's it. So, and I say that's it with a heaping dose of irony as I'm already into this lengthy video and haven't even gone through the rules of the turn. Again, hopefully you are judiciously using the timestamps down below, and you also afford me this teacher's pleasure of just going into a system I really enjoy operating myself and going into all manner of depths to explain to other people. Brevity is not a characteristic that I typically exhibit. So the actual turn. So just like in a normal player game, you're going to skip the start of the year stuff because it doesn't apply. So in spring, it'll be played in order. When the player has the active player marker, they'll place their Herald and they'll take any spring actions. That's normal. But when the sim has the active player marker, it goes in the specific sequence. So it activates their collaborator if they have it. It activates their court if the speaker has any influence on it. So they gain the amount of influence equal to that on the speaker because they can keep adding to that. They pillage if any sim cards, any pillaging cards that the sim controls are on the map. And then it places its Herald. It reveals the top card of the maneuver deck and places it there. So that's the spring. and whatever order, whoever's in first goes first, and then you move on to summer. So this is also played in order. When the player has the active marker, they'll play cards at the region, and they must place a card at each region. And then also they may play a card at the Great Road. Now, you'll notice that the actions, they are not part of this player sequence. So it is the placing of cards and then the summer actions. And that'll be important a little bit. So when the sim has the active player marker, they're going to flip over the resolution deck and then follow this sequence. They'll draw cards equal to its maximum hand size. If it ever draws its War Machine, it's going to just place it off to the side, face down, and then save that for later and keep drawing until it gets to its hand size. So it'll then organize in priority. It'll shuffle all those cards it draws, and then when it'll deal them out into these groups. So on the left, it'll have one fog card, and then a stack of all gold cards, then a stack of all silver or half-filled cards, and then a stack of all bronze or crescent cards. And any remaining fog cards that they have are going to be off to the side. Now this, some turns will be mostly gold, some will be mostly fog, some will be a mix of all of them, some will be only bronze. It's a total grab bag, and get to more of that down the road as to why this is the way it is and why I like it. Then you're going to place cards in priority order that you found on the resolution card. So if it was 1, 2, 3 to top to bottom on the map, you would put that first fog card there, then the first gold card. If you have any more gold cards, that would go on 3. If not, you go on to silver. If you don't have any silver, you go on to bronze. So it just says skip the groups that you don't have any remaining or any cards at all in that pile. And then if you have any more cards, or if the sim has any more cards, they would put one down into the Great Road, whatever is next in order. And finally, the sim will place their companies. Places all their companies in the region with that little sunrise, kind of gear sunrise on the resolution card. And then, and only then, does the player take their summer actions, which include placing of companies. So you will get to see, even if you are leading off, you have more influence, so you have to place your cards first, and the sim will place theirs down, face down after you. You will get to place your companies after you see where their cards go, and critically, where you saw the sim put down their companies. Again, at least in the current version. Finally, we're going to figure out what transpired with all this card drawing and placing in autumn. So if the player is last on the order track, they place the resolution markers as normal. However, if the sim is last on the order track, it places them in regions in reverse order to their priority numbers on the resolution cards. Then both the player and the sim reveal and resolve each region one at a time. So this is going to be par for the course clashing, except it's just you keeping track of all the rules. Just like with a meat bag game, any keywords that would happen as soon as the cards get revealed, eliminate, vulnerable, retreat, that sort of stuff, they take place, and you figure out who's the winner, who's the loser. If you win stuff, you take the things you choose on the board. If the sim wins, they take the rewards listed on their resolution card. Next up, we get to winter. So the player resolves their journeying cards as normal. The sim resolves the journeying cards in sequence. Now, on this reference card glosses over the fact you're still going to flip them over and check their strength. So whoever has the highest strength in this region or this part of the board is going to do this first. So the player gets to choose, or the sim will follow the instructions here. It will pass if it reveals a card without a printed strength and take no further actions. So if the player has 2 kingdom cards, the sim will attempt to steal it. So what it will do by putting together its resolution and its maneuver cards, it will tell you the order that it's placing, the priority on the different kingdom cards. So you have like the diamond, the person, and the door, the things, the people, and the places. And sometimes it will want one of those. It will always want one of them more than the others. So first, it will try to steal the one it wants most. However, if the player doesn't have any of those, or if the strength that the sim has on their card isn't enough to steal it, then it will go to the other card the player has and attempt to do that. And if it can't, or if the player doesn't have 2 kingdom cards, the sim is going to gain a card from the Great Road. It'll occupy the card that is the highest priority that is available on the Great Road. So it always takes something, and it might not be its first or even its second choice in terms of type. And then it will take a bonus based on that type. It'll gain an influence if it's a good or a thing. It'll put 1 influence on the speaker if it's a person, and it'll put 1 on the rider if it's a place. Then you'll take winter actions. So this will be in order. The player with the active marker will get to do whatever actions that they would like. Then the sim, the only thing that they need to do is deploy its war machine if it has one in its area. And then that will go to the highest priority region on its most recent resolution card. And finally, end of the year. Player will play theirs as normal, so they'll take essentially the cleanup steps like they normally would, but the sim will do the following. Discard its current maneuver and resolution cards, return its Herald and all its companies to its player board. It moves any card with loyal to its play area, and it moves any remaining revealed card to the discard area. So it's largely the same as the player one, except it gets all its companies back for free, which is a blow. And then wrapping back to the top, the one that I skipped earlier, because in the first turn you won't do this, the start of the year. Player draws up to their hand size, the sim will not. The sim doesn't draw until the summer season, but you will determine order the normal way based on who has more influence. And that's the turn. So again, the more you know the game, this will be all you really need, because it's talking about the phases and the keywords and the actions that you are getting used to when you're playing. So this next part is really, when something comes up, a head scratcher or one of those edge cases that you don't see all the time. So the first one is activating deployed card. So before revealing a region in autumn, if the autumn or the sim already has a deployed card there, they'll always choose to use it. The player gets to decide whether this is the turn to do it or not, but the sim will always flip that over. It's usually their war machine, but other ones can be deployed as well. Triggering keywords, the sim will always trigger keywords that they're able on the cards revealed in the clash. We talked about that already, but just as a heads up, there are other keywords like authority and quest on their cards, which don't really actually work the way that other cards would, because remember, the sim doesn't ever use the rewards listed on the actual spaces in the region, and those are what trigger authority and quest. So going to the court and your site of power respectively, as opposed to the Simulacrum cards, which will say put an influence on the speaker or the rider. So those ones you can ignore, but the other things, again, eliminate, invulnerable, those are the big ones that you'll want to make sure you pay attention to. Anytime the sim wants to target or remove a card, it's pretty simple. It's always going to be targeting if their opponent's card of the highest strength eligible and their own card of the lowest strength available. I mean, stands to reason. You don't really want to mess up your own strategy, but you definitely want to mess up your opponent's. If any clashes are tied, strengths are the same if you add everything up. Again, the player will have to decide, do you want to kind of continue and place another card to do a second clash? But the sim will always choose yes in that question. What they'll do is they'll just flip over the top card of their deck. They'll just top deck it. Could be good, could be bad. And you do have a little bit of help here because you can see what type of card that is on their deck, gold, silver, bronze, or fog. But as any passing glance through the deck would show you, that's not always the biggest indicator or the most clear indicator. There is a bit of diversity within those categories, but it's a little bit for you to, start to kind of think what might be in their hand, so to speak. The Herald will do all the normal Herald stuff. If it's on a site and the sim wins it, it gets an additional influence. If it's on the same site as yours, the player's Herald, it will either steal from you if it wins, or you will steal from them if you win. The Fortifying cards. If the player has a Fortifying card on the board in a region where the Simulacrum won, it will check to see if the card is in the same column as the Herald is. The Simulacrum Herald, that is. If it is, the Simulacrum will remove the Fortifying cards to the player's discard instead of claiming any rewards. So again, it has to dig through that card just like a player would have to, but only if it's on the side of the board that their Herald is. Even though they're not actually choosing sides and choosing rewards, they have their own, it still checks to see if it's on the Herald side. So for Pillaging cards, if the sim wins and there's at least one eligible location in the region that it won, it'll still gain its current reward. However, if there's two Pillaging cards in that region, then it will take no rewards from that clash. In both cases, if the Pillaging cards belong to a player, they will be moved to their owner's discard pile as normal after resolving the region. So it'll still sneak in a reward if there's one space that can get it from, but not if there's two. Then placing a card in a region after clash. If a sim has to place a card in the map, it will always try to place it on the same column of the map as their Herald. If it's unable to do so, it'll try to play the card to the other location. And if it's unable to do so, it'll discard it. And then we're done with autumn. That's where most of the question marks lie. In the winter phase, so a couple of things here. If the sim takes a card and it already has two cards, it will vacate the kingdom card that has the highest strength, that is occupying a kingdom card. So it will put that card back into its deck, the kingdom card will go back underneath its deck, and then it will go back into rotation. So it wants to free up, because sometimes you'll get a lucky break and you'll get a really high strength or just an overall good card that the sim accidentally ties up with a kingdom card. But it can free them that way. And lastly, the kingdom cards only the kingdom cards only confer their rewards once. So as opposed to a player, which could use something from a kingdom card turn after turn after turn, the sim only gets the one-time use, and trust me, that's enough. Okay, so then some clarifications. So the victory is normally 20 influence. Typically, I actually play on the skirmish, which is one of the mod cards, which does technically make the game harder, it says, but I just want to get more games in, so it makes it a little bit shorter. But typically up to 20. The behavior cards talks about if they have the same name at the top, like the maneuver and the resolution cards, that means they're going to be a little bit more cohesive, like really aimed at taking the court or taking the battle to the streets. But remember, only the one behavior name on the resolution card is the one that affects the fog cards. Attrition, it will not ever suffer from that. So even if it has to shuffle and make a new draw deck, it never actually loses that hand size like a player would. If you ever have something to look at a player's hand, what you will actually do, because it doesn't have a hand, you will just look at the top X cards of its draw pile, X being its hand size. So the normal is 4, so if you were able to look at a player's hand, you would look at the top 4 cards. If there are only 3 cards in a draw pile, you would only get to look at those 3. If it ever has to move a card, like a Pillaging card, it will kind of do this like zigzag across the kingdom and then zigzag around from like the lowlands to the highlands. So it will always kind of just eventually it will cover all 6 of the spaces. And so that way you have an idea of, it'll just kind of keep going until there's a space that is a legal place for it to put their card, and then call it good. And then archetypes, we'll talk more about that in another video. But I just want to say before the example turn, which again, if you made it to this part in the video, sound out down below at the pre-turn. you've listened to me ramble enough, but I do not begrudge anyone who just clicks on the video and goes right to the example turn to hear me talk through it, as opposed to me ramble on through the rule book of the thing that is most likely going to be different down the road. But again, I'm just doing what I can to hype this game because I love it. So the archetypes are fantastic. We'll talk more about them. The way you can make the opponent different kind of characters that you can go against is great. But what I think is so fantastic is this system of these different backs of the cards. So like the gold, silver, bronze, fog, and the war machine. So the reason this is cool is, like I said before, there is some variety within those categories in terms of strength or overall effectiveness of the cards, but it's not a guaranteed thing, nor is it a complete and total, opaque system. So you can sort of try to, divine what might happen based on that logo on the back of their card. But sometimes you're tricked. Sometimes you think that it's going to be fine, and you say, oh, it's just a bronze, or ooh, that one's a fog card, or whatever. But situationally, it's not what you expected or wanted it to be. So to me, this is a fantastic way of implementing what has to be a randomized system, because you're playing a automated opponent, but it's done so in a way that's just almost, not quite, but close, knowable. Just like your opponents around the table. You might think your brother or your friend or your spouse or whoever is going to go for the wilderness, because obviously they're going to finish up that last point on their site of power to get their thing, blah, blah, blah. And maybe they completely, throw you for a loop and all but ignore that region, knowing that that's what they're going to do, and they go somewhere else. And that's what makes bluffing and like hidden information games so interesting with people around a table. But the system that's in place, that has been made for Old King's Crown, it really brings with it an amazingly adept system of kind of doing the same thing, even though it's completely different. And I think it's just fantastic. All right, so with that, we're going to go over the table to get this one turn. Later on, I'll show you an actual playthrough all the way through whenever that comes out. All right, so welcome to the table. This is turn 2, or year 2. I played through first year and mostly let the game do its thing, and then tweaked a couple of the certain setups so we can hopefully show off a bunch of the features in the Simulacrum's play style. So kind of a couple of preamble sort of things. In turn 1, so I neutralized the Simulacrum's air, which does always come back here, by playing my decree, which turns into a tie, and I won the tie, and that was great. So now it is pillaging there on the battlefield. At the end, they did draw a war machine, which we know is going to be that, but it's in good habit to just keep it face down, because that's what you do as meatbags do. So I guess you don't necessarily need to, but so there's their war machine. They put it to the battlefield because they kind of want to take it back, I guess. I did use one of my tactics, the School of the Storms, to add +2 strength. Now, a bunch of these are going to, on the back, have a way that you reactivate them so you can utilize them again. This one is one of the few that's interesting. It has actually a stronger version of itself on the back, but then once you use it that second time, it's just gone. And you'll also see I sanded down the edges so they fit nicely together without binding, which the real copy will not have that issue, but the prototype kind of does, but it's not a big deal. So I intentionally did absolutely nothing in the lowlands because I knew that the reward that the Simulacrum was going to have was looking for gold cards in their discard, which they didn't have a discard pile yet. So they got 2 influence, which is not a bad win, but I was able to just keep my better cards. And I did manage to sneak out a win up in the Highlands. That was with the use of that tactic card. So that means I have a person in the court, and they were kind of aiming for that last time. Lastly, we both got a kingdom card, but I got kind of costly one that's going to turn my ruse card, which is normally just like, haha, I don't actually spend a card because it can go right back to my hand, but you definitely don't win a battle. So it's turning my ruse card into a copy of my heir, which is pretty cool, but I need to pay 1 influence on here each turn and discard cards from the top of my draw pile equal to the influence. So yeah, it's costly, but I'm hoping for an early game kind of like strength bonus from that. All right, so let's get into it. Since this is year 2, we do start with the beginning, the start of year step, which we skip in the first turn. So I will draw up to my hand size of 6. So I get Nixing Knife, one of my favorite name and artwork combos, and it has Eliminate. Scout's Report, where I can reinforce or retreat, and Siegebreaker. So some decent cards to make use of coming up here. Some good tools that we'll be able to implement. The other thing is we check to see who has the most influence, which the Simulacrum has 3 to my 1, so they will stay first on the order, which I am okay with. So in the summer, we are going to flip over the Manoeuvre card for the Simulacrum, and they're going to try to send their Herald to the battlefield. Sorry, I said summer. This is spring. And the thing about the battlefield is I'm pillaging there, so they can't go there. So we're going to use the traveling rules that the Simulacrum has, and it's going to go down a row and over to the other column. So instead of the battlefield, they are going to go to the shrine. So I think I'm okay with that. I don't think I'm going to be contesting him. I'm going to place mine in the harvest field because I need money to keep this thing going. At a certain point, I'm going to not pay this and let it go off on its merry way, but at least 1, probably 2 years I want to keep it, so I need to make some influence. Then it goes to actions for the spring, so I'm going to make 1 from having someone in the court. I'm also going to make 1 from my Pillaging card, which then has to move somewhere else, and I'm going to move it up to the castle. Now in a multiplayer mode, that would be a great way to prevent the other players from taking over my court seat. But since there's at least 1 spot open, if the Simulacrum does win up here and it says to, oh, I didn't put the speaker back out. Hang on. There we go. So going to be kind of hard to even attempt to get back in the court without the speaker. So since there's at least 1 spot open in the Highlands, if it did say to put influence on the speaker, which would send them into the court, they could still do it. But I'm just going to send it there because why not? Then last up, I could use my thing here, collaborator. Do I want to? I don't know. I think I'm going to do fine here, so I'm going to be able to save it. Because it only goes down when you use it. So I have it at 3 because I just took it over last turn. So I'm actually not going to use it. That might not be the... In a multiplayer game, I definitely wouldn't trust keeping it for any length of time. But against the Simulacrum, sometimes you can really force that hand. We'll see if I can. Then last thing, I do need to place influence here, and I discard the top card of my deck. Ooh, my champion. So I have to discard the storyteller. That's that's painful. That's a good card that I don't want to not have. Hopefully this pans out for me. All right, so moving into the summer. Oh, this should be actually up here. It's not discarded yet. Let's check out the resolution card. So they're prioritizing lowlands, highlands, plateau. And then we are going to draw their 3 cards, fog, fog, silver, and then add anything that's in their play area, which we know is their air card. So they have 2 fogs, silver, and a gold. We're going to shuffle these up. And then we're going to put them into their piles. Oops, sorry. So from left to right, 1 fog, all golds, all silvers, all bronze, which you don't have, and then any remaining fog cards. So that will be the order that they fill those in. So before you go into those priorities, remember, we're going to look to see where they want to place their first fog card, which is at number 2, which for them is the Highlands. So then we're going to place their other fog card here in the Lowlands. Whoopsies. Their silver card, and then their other fog card down here in the Great Road. Okay, so you can put these kind of back over here. Last but not least, we are going to place their companies. So all 3 of them are going to go right there. Now, as for me, we are going to, let's see what we want to do. I think I want to put my air up here. I'm going to put my pretend air right underneath that. So we have a, what you call it here, the war machine. So we're going to just kind of move that up so we don't forget it. Then I'm going to put a nixing knife here. Yeah, that's good, because I know what this is. It's their air, and that's not a shield. This has vulnerable to shield, so we wouldn't want that to happen. And then lastly, I don't think I want to even put anything on the road. I'm just gonna leave it down there. Now, let's see. Up at the top. So this is 5 and something. This is going to be a 10. I'm going to put a couple of companies in here as well. So a little bit of strength. I do have my tactic, actually. Maybe let's do that instead. Bring those companies back and save them for now. Yeah. Okay, sweet. So in the autumn, I get to place the markers because I am further back on the track. I think what I want to get done first is this one. I think I should be able to win there, and then that prevents any shenanigans from being spread, like bolstering or whatever else. I don't care about this one, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to win it because I'm going to, off this guy, and then their companies are just left there. So let's do it in that way. And first of all, let's reveal what's at the battlefield. Okay, so they have an 8 and a 5, which makes 13. They don't have anything that they're adding here. And I have a 10 and a 4. So that is exactly 1 more than I need. So I do, in fact, take that area. So I'll flip that over, and I get 2, but then an additional 1 because my Herald was there. So I'm up to 5. That's a good start. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and try in the Highlands. So Shifting Smoke. Invulnerable. Its strength alters to create a tie. there are no supporters, its strength is 1. Plotting is its advanced one, but as you know, we have regrouping, so that's not going to affect it. However, it does make a tie. That's a bummer. So we have 10 to 10. Now, I could actually just use Startling Battle Cry, which I think I will. So we tied it. I'm going to flip this over, and I am immediately going to win that tie. And I'm just going to claim it. And that's going to make me feel real good. You know, I'm doing this, I should really put them face down so I know what's been revealed and what hasn't. These help if you ever forget to do that, but just as a, you know, good thing to remember. So what I'm going to do is I'll take the Wilderness. So I'm going to gain 1. We did that. So I get to send someone with Quest to my Site of Power. And so I'm going to send that over to the Old Sentry, and I'm going to spend it actually right... no, I'll just keep it over there. So I'm one quest down. I need 2 more to unlock my myth card over there. I could have also spent that quest to unlock the tactic that I just used, but I think we'll kind of start to think about the future, especially when I get rid of this kingdom card, because it's going to be costly soon. So last but not least, we're going to flip this over, and lo and behold, it is their heir, just like we knew it was. So our Nixing Knife is going to take care of it. Now, it does have Resilient, so usually Eliminate would send these cards to the Lost pile, which is harder to get them back from, but instead it's just going to go to the discard pile. However, Loyal instead brings them from discard to in their play area, so we prevent that from happening. And then we win here too, because it's 5 to 3. So let's see, I'm going to, I think, well, game 1 for sure. And then I'm going to, from Necropolis, shuffle my discard pile, which is just that 1 card. Shuffle, 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 and draw up to 3 cards into my hand. Fantastic. Wow, that was a really successful round, or year rather. So down here in the, that's our autumn. So now we're going to go to winter, where they're going to flip this over, and they've got at least 1 strength here. It's not the most efficient use of a fog card. Usually those are better spent elsewhere, but they will get a kingdom card. So we're going to look over, and they're looking for people cards are at number 1, and the tiebreaker is rightmost of those cards. So we look over here, and we have 3 of them, but they'll take the rightmost, the Old Enchantress, and she'll go right here. They will occupy. And for people cards, they will put 1 on the speaker, which means my person gets sent away, and the speaker will gain them 1 influence come springtime next year. And then the end of year. So at this point, it's pretty simple. We're going to take the orders off. Heralds are going to come back. Usually player companies would be swept into reserve, where you can earn them back or pay for them back, really. But the Simulacrum will always just get all of their companies back. So my +4 token, who served me well, will go away. Nixing Knife will go away. But Ruse and Air will return. So I have a pretty strong, my 6 cards, or 5 cards, my 6, pretty strong, because I have an 11, a 10, and a 10 with the, actually I should put the Ruse right here, because we know what that is, and it's not a Ruse. So their cards are going to be swept into their discard pile. We'll move our kingdom cards down, and that's going to be it. So that is 1 more turn. That was turn 2, and we made out quite well. We went into it with 1. No, Yeah, 1. And we came out of it with 6. They went into it with 3 and they left with 3, but they do have a seat in the court now. So, you know, they got that going for them. Also, this false throne is going to cost me 2 and 2 cards. So, having that 6, like we said before, it's going to be good because I'm going to be losing money pretty quickly. But here we go. That was 1 turn. Takes quite a bit less time if you're not narrating every single part of it, but hopefully that showed you an example of how this all works. Okay, well, thank you for making it to this point. Hopefully this has piqued your interest if you're a solo board gamer like myself. I think the game is fantastic, and it's only the prototype. So more to come on this from me, and I'm sure others in the forthcoming days and weeks and months and years with the depth of this game, I'm sure. But until then, thanks for taking a pause with Give Pause, and we'll see you next time.